Today I have an incredible honor to speaking to an Australian literary, I think I can say legend. I think that's not underselling it or overselling it. I think with over 200 books and manuscripts printed, her works have been seen and read for since the 70s. She comes with a lifetime of brilliant works. She's written picture books, she's written children's stories, YA, adult mysteries, writing books, manuscripts, non-fiction and adventure stories. She has championed Australian writers in for generations, and I don't think there's many Australians that wouldn't be familiar with her work if not her name. Hazel Edwards, OMA, OAM. Welcome to my channel. OAM is Order of Australian Medal for my foreign watchers and listeners. Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be on my channel.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm known colloquially as the hippopotamus lady, which is a bit of a mixed blessing when you're my height, because of the hippopotamus on the roof eating cake. That was the first story, but and probably I'm one of the older writers around. I prefer the word vintage. But I'm also a rare breed in that I've made a living from writing, not of the millionaire class in the least, but probably comparable to what a teacher would have earned. And that's the reason, partly for the array of books, but in different genres, but also because I get bored easily and I like learning new things. So with each book, I research the background, and I think it's been an incredibly rich. I turned out 80 just a couple of weeks ago, and my daughter did a doco. So we've been looking at these sorts of things. And I think it's been a very rich life, not so much in finances, but in experiences. And that is the real thing that matters about the writing, that you have the opportunity to take a skill that you've got that's a portable skill into other people's lives. You go and learn about whatever their jobs or their passions are, or wherever they live. And there are all sorts of opportunities. I've been incredibly lucky to have adventurous possibilities. I mean, I never contemplated I'd end up as an Antarctic expedition. I don't even like the cold, but it was the fact that there's a berth for one creative with the Australian Antarctic Division, and sometimes that's a photographer, sometimes it's a writer. And I heard of another illustrator, writer who'd been down there, and I didn't think I had hope. I really didn't, because it's a pretty stringent medical, and you got to be fit. But anyway, I did end up there, and I am so grateful to have had experiences like that and to meet people who are as resourceful as the expeditioners. And that has influenced some of my later writing. I mean, I wrote quite a bit about the Antarctic for various mediums, picture book and so on. But the most recent book I did, Wasted, which is not set in Antarctica at all, I could not have written that book without having had the experience of living in isolation in Antarctica. So all the richness of experiences are the legacy you get as a writer or working in the creative fields.
So, for anyone that doesn't know, you, as you referenced, you are the hippopotamus lady.
Yes.
There's a hippopotamus on my roof eating cake is a much beloved children's book here in Australia, and I know it is sold around the world. I was talking to an American friend the other day, and like, have you heard of this? And he knew about it, and um, but you that's just, I mean, it's just your legacy. Like any book's going to be your legacy, but that is just a minute part of your writing. You've written many books, as I referenced earlier, and the latest one, Wasted, is something I think it's different and very topical right now. You tell us, without giving too many spoilers away, about Wasted.
Um, yes, well, it's a one-word title with a question mark after it because I know that wasted has many meanings, and I'm not referring to the getting drunk meaning. It is wasted opportunities. I decided to make it a young adult novel rather than adult, although it's really a sort of crossover, because a young adult novel is around for much longer than an adult novel. And I always had screen in mind for this, the visual aspects of this. What gave me the idea for this, apart from the fact that I mentioned the Antarctic expedition, and I was up on the bridge with the Norwegian pilot, and he said, you know, over there, that has never been mapped. And I thought, gosh, are there places in the world that don't belong to anybody and haven't been mapped? So a couple of decades later, I used that idea. I've also been, for the setting of this one, which is set around the giant garbage patches mid-ocean, which do in fact actually exist, but politically they don't belong to anybody. And I had been involved with a number of Persian asylum seekers for almost 10 years now, mainly because of their daughter. And I wanted to pay credit to the innovative problem solving of many of the asylum seekers, but the difficulties they face in getting a visa in order to enter a country or stay in a country and to contribute. So I thought, well, what if they set up their own country? Now, nobody wants a garbage patch, but scientifically, and they're not living on the garbage patch, they're living in the shanty boats going around, which are really, in fact, science labs. I had to work all of this out with my scientific contacts as to what was possible. But it is possible to convert biofuel from the garbage and to market it and to use what, in many cases, asylum seekers have been political activists, and to use those skills to solve, with science, to solve scientific problems. And so I got them to do a switch. And so you've got this fantastic brain power and problem solving skills, but I wanted it from the point of view of a young boy. And so the character, Kit, is a fantastic problem solver. He's not your conventional kid. The cover was drawn very carefully so he could be sort of almost any teenage age, almost any culture. And he joins these boats mainly because he's got a mother who's pretty scatty and who's there. But there are a number who are developing scientific new ideas and who are getting the patents for these ideas. And that is what is subsidizing this state that they create. So that was the political background of it. But then I peopled it with some very interesting characters. And one of them, somebody said to me, oh, God, he's like Trump. And I said, no, I don't think so. But I have a complete range of characters because I saw them as potential actors in a cast for a screen. I always wrote it with screen in mind. I contacted some of the scientists that I had been involved with before, and this is one of the joys of being a writer. You get to meet such interesting people. And I spoke to the chippy. The chippy, Peter Cheers, Chippy is a carpenter in the tradie world, but also in Antarctica. And he can build anything. He can fix anything. I said, how can I get some sort of stable base that they can build something they can live on? So I know a lot about shipbuilding now. I know quite a bit about oceans, mining at the bottom of oceans, the United Nations, a whole lot of other things. So the joy of writing, with every book I've done, I've tried to move into a new area so I learn something new. I also write adult mysteries, and I did a very short forensic science course a few years ago in order to make sure that my reasons for bumping people off was valid. So I think it's the continuing to learn that has appealed to me. But the wasted book, I've had some really interesting feedback on that, some very good reviews. But it's just at a point at the moment in the book industry where things are changing very, very drastically. And that book took me exactly 1 year to write. I know that. I started on January the 1st and I finished the last day in December, deliberately so. But
Yep.
I don't normally work like that. But I I did a lot of research for that one and a lot of trialing with some of the English language schools in Melbourne where the students love the concept, but the language was too high. So things like that I've had to adjust. Um, but yeah, it's been, I think it's the most important book I've written so far, but I would very much like an extremely wealthy millionaire producer to say, what a fabulous book. And look, I'd like to invest in your film. And it will happen. It will happen one day. You never know. You never know.
So what about refugees appeal to you for the story?
The reason I became involved with that was a particular young girl, Negan, from a Persian family, who was acting as interpreter for her family. She was exactly the same age as my eldest grandson, and she did not have the same opportunities because they were here on temporary visas, they're still on temporary, and she's a very impressive young girl who wants to be a doctor and who could be
Yeah,
in terms of her abilities. And I became involved with her because a couple of my teacher friends were teaching English to the family. Not to the daughter, she was already, her language was she was already bilingual. I became involved with them about 10 years ago. And that's where I was very interested in positive approaches to solving challenges, but not wasting the fantastic resources that you have with people. In the past, people have come to Australia from various countries and have contributed enormous amounts. They're not a threat, they're a possible source of improving and solving problems for other people too. But they can only do that if they're legal, and it's very difficult to get that sorted at the moment.
I think that's what the people don't understand that when the rationale in these marches that are going on is when you mix cultures and ideas, it's just pure growth can come from that. And that's why multiculturalism has worked throughout history, but it still is that catalyst of
Well,
creating disruption, to
I
put it
agree with you,
nicely.
Aaron. And each of us can only make one little change. You know, you can just do something a little differently. I don't do protest marches. I don't do jumping up and down and violence. But what I do is I write young adult fiction because I want to take the potential readers or viewers into somebody else's world for the length of that story and to come out the other end with a bit more compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
And I've always worked on that basis. And that seems to me to be a better way long term of slowly changing things. And I'm against violent marches for any reason, but I'm all in favour of changing the status quo to make sure that we give everybody a fair go.
That's what yeah, 100% agree with that. I've had that conversation. As soon as you learn someone's story, like you can't believe the mix, you can't
If
be
they're
angry at.
personal,
Yeah,
one to one, why
yeah,
would you be scared of that person? You actually like their sense of humour or you like the whatever it is. And by fiction, but on the other hand, um, a writer for youth cannot write propaganda. And that's one of the problems at the moment. I think some of the writers are writing propaganda based on either culture or gender or whatever, and they're not looking at a story that people will want to read. Propaganda is when you present only one point of view and
yeah.
you don't present that the weaknesses and strengths of everybody, but how can we work together? So what I decided with my character, I called him Kit, partly because I'm downsizing with words at the moment. My characters are getting shorter names, and my book titles are getting shorter because when you've written "There's a hippopotamus on our roof eating cake" for 46 years on forms, and it takes ages, a one-word title has a lot in its favour. And also a character called Kit, who's a reasonably neutral sort of name, not belonging to any particular culture. I don't come out and say he's on the spectrum. I don't say that at all. But I say he's really good at solving problems in a different sort of way and using visuals. So what he does is he draws solutions. He draws caricatures of all the people who are on board, how he sees them, whether they're sea animals or whatever they are. But he then uses that skill to solve problems in other ways. And I see it as different ways of solving problems using the character in this way. And I got really quite fond of him. He's, but the reader will identify with him because he's clumsy and he stuffs up on things, and that's normal.
Yeah.
I also wanted a range of people on board, but they had to have good enough skills to solve the problems. So I've got one old handyman type who's good at fixing stuff, but I've got quite a few of high-powered female scientists. And I realised I had too many high-powered older female scientists, so I got rid of a couple of them and amalgamated one. So I've got a range of possibilities. There is also a person who is the head of government here, who is a young girl who's only 16. And these two don't get on too well to start with, right? So I've got the youth as well. It's not youth good, old, bad, or vice versa. Not like that at all. Everyone's got weaknesses and strengths. And I think you can probably see some parallels between some of the things that are happening now. What really started to worry me was at the beginning of the year, I plotted out all sorts of things when I first started writing this. And then the technological things started happening in real life around. And the developments in technology, the things that I'd said, what if you could actually tap into somebody's mind? What effect would that have for diplomacy? You knew exactly what they thought of you. That's going to be a problem. And things are getting a bit close to that now. So in that way, what if is one of the most important questions a writer can ask. This is what I would call faction, this one. It is midway between fiction and a factual story, but factual in the sense of the potential geography and the scientific basis to it. And I ran it past a couple of physicists I know, and they fixed up things. I ran, I can't tell too much of the plot, but there was a complication there which related to a virus. And my expert said to me, you can't do that crossover there. It's not going to happen. I had to make sure I had the right medical details that were feasible.
Yeah.
So those things, that's why firstly going to people who know the content that you don't know and ask the questions where you're looking for interesting incidents, then write it, then go back and have it checked that you haven't made some crass errors. I think just about every book I've written in manuscript had at least one crass error in it that had to be fixed up. And there's a great relief that you feel, well, they've checked it and they said it's possible.
Yeah. So with an idea like this, what comes first? Is it something about the science? Is it something about the refugees, and then you just found a way together? Where does the inspiration for a story like this come from?
I think well, originally I started not with people as characters. I started with the concept of something like Animal Farm, which would be creatures who were fable-like. And it was, good versus evil, all that, the sort of thing that you've got in Animal Farm. And I thought, I could make them insects, because people don't usually write about insects. They write about cuddly teddy bears and large hippos, but they don't write about insects. And I thought, no, that's not going to work, not on a rubbish dump, or alongside the rubbish dump. And I had to make it clear. I invented a type of boat, a shanty boat, on which they could conduct scientific labs all the way around. And the various asylum seekers basically do a bit of conscription time, so many hours. They work on that, and in return, they'll get a visa or they'll join the state or whatever it is. It had to be feasible.
Yeah.
So it's been challenging. I was a bit interested in the map, first of all. I spent quite a bit of time trying to find out. Our family used to go orienteering, and I was a lousy map reader. I got lost more often than anybody else in my age group. But my son was a cartographer for a while, so I can read a map now. And I was interested, where could I place this story which was feasible, that they could create their own new legal state, but I didn't want to be too prescriptive, because that situation is going to change, because the real garbage patches in the ocean at the moment have only grown in the last few decades, and they're going to move, and there's going to be other ones too. And I didn't want it allied. When I looked at a lot of people who built their own boats and traveled around the world and so on, they quite often use the resources on the mainland. I wanted this lot to be completely independent, and I didn't want to name a mainland that they were close to. A lot of people who travel around near Mexico and various other places that have built that. I looked at a lot of um, uh, solo sailors who live on a boat all year. I have a distant relative who built his own boat, and he went on. The most interesting thing is, it took a number of years. He built it in his drive in Melbourne, and he's dyslexic. And this boat is the most beautifully crafted, with precision, work of art you've ever seen, which floats beautifully. So I followed what he was doing on his boat, and the passion with the boat that gave me ideas about what was possible on my sort of made up boats, shanty boats, because I needed to have they needed to be science labs, really, in order that they could experiment. So I think it was the location, it was the concept of a fable, and I thought, the fable's not going to work. The insects aren't going to talk to each other. In other kids' stories, I've used animals in the past because they're no gender and no culture, and it makes them broader. But like the hippo doesn't talk to anybody either.
Yeah.
So you've got to have someone who can talk. So I thought, no, I don't know that that's going to work. A praying mantis isn't going to do it for you. So I thought, no, they're going to have to be people.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up with the boy. And his father is a scientist, a maverick scientist who's been condemned for whatever it was he said he'd found out. And he's in palliative care. And he said to his son, you're going to have to make a choice. I have an antidote here, but what are you going to do with it? So I built up a lot of the possibilities, and he was fond of his father. So it's drawing on a lot of things that had happened, but I wasn't conscious at the time I was accumulating them. But once I started to write it, I then went in search of more information.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it always fascinates me how some people have the idea and then they go backtrack and see how to make it work. And other people just, yeah, they just collect the ideas and then, well, hang on, there's
Yeah.
something here, and go from there.
Well, I think with this one, I of the asylum seekers I met, there was one interpreter who struck me, really made a big impression on me. And I thought, this woman speaks 7 languages,
Oh,
and she
wow.
goes in and out of languages, explaining things, etc., etc. And I thought, if you've got those skills, and you can soften the message, or you can change the message if you want to, or you can try and improve the situation. So I was very interested in making the hero an interpreter, but then I thought, no, what I've done is to give Kit the boy the drawing skills, which are universal,
Yeah.
not limited to any one language. So there's a lot of ideas in it. I put a page on my website because for this book, that it's possible for people to download 3 chapters to read, first of all. Partly, Tournament of Minds were interested in it. I was one of the original problem writers for Tournament of Minds, which is for gifted students working in groups to solve problems. And I wrote some of the first problems. I loved writing problems for them. And in a way, if you write a novel, it's like writing a Tournament of Minds problem, but you've got to come up with the solution. So I wrote them a problem that was sort of around this that they could use and so they were using the book, I think, in as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's very much an ideas book. It was launched at the at Albury Wodonga right around the Murray Festival at the end of last year, and my family went up with me, and there were a lot of students all down the river who were writing in the local writing competition. I gave out the prizes and talked about it and so on. And then Wasted was launched, and they were coming out to the signing table because there were a lot of proud grandparents there and parents, because there were a lot of boys who'd written stories, a lot of fun boys. Anyway, there was one boy in the front queue. Well, my family had come with me, and my 14-year-old, he was then, Henry, was one of my test readers for this. And he was just standing behind me with the book bag. He was going to help me take it out afterwards when we'd finished. And they didn't realise we were related. We don't look alike. And the boy in the front queue said, "Hey, mate, you read this one?" And Henry said, "Yeah." And the boy said, "What do you think of it?" He said, "Awesome." Now that guaranteed that everybody in that queue bought it, every grandparent bought it. So I think Albury Wodonga, quite a few of them have replaced it, let me tell you.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And I didn't set him up at all. No,
Yeah.
he's definitely a reader. But yeah, and I would pay credit to my family as a writer. I have exploited them mercilessly when I need to know about their occupations, or my son works out back as a hydrogeologist. So anything out back in Darwin's been really useful in stories, whether it's about crocodiles or whatever it is. And my son-in-law's an infectious diseases doctor. So the technicalities of that were very helpful there. So that's where I think it is very difficult for writers sometimes. Inevitably, a lot of people write a story that's thinly disguised autobiography for their first one, because that's what they know about, and that's fine. But you have to go beyond that, and you have to look at other settings, other cultures, and do some research, because otherwise you're only going to write the one autobiography and there's not going to be anything else.
Yeah.
Now, I did do that first. The first book I had published, before Hippo even, was one called General Store. Now, it was young adult, set in a general store in Gippsland. Well, I did live in a general store in Gippsland when I was a teenager, and I followed the rules of write about what you know, but the characters weren't, they were made up. But that book, I didn't expect to get published. I wouldn't have given it such a terrible title if I did, because general store means that people think it's an army rank. General store. And
Yeah.
it went into Finnish, which was such a thrill. It was the first book I'd ever had in another language, and it came in a package, and I thought, I think I've seen that somewhere before, but I can't read any. It's got lots of J's and S's and dots, and oh, it's Finnish. Well, it just so happens that orienteering is a Finnish sport. So one of the orienteers was Finnish. So she read it. She said, oh, it's quite good. I was thrilled because there was no way I was going to be able to read it in Finnish. So that was a particular thrill. I think when your story moves into another culture, even though it's set in either your own culture or somewhere else, and other people are reading it. And that is why I think that for me, I've had about, I think, 10 different languages for translation. But the one that's given me the greatest delight is the Braille. And that is for kids who are blind or adults and so on, and the Felix project for that. The Hippo was one of the first books they did for that, and that is very, very satisfying. And that's why also I wrote down, just so I remember to mention to you, that Read How You Want publisher. I don't know whether Wasted has been picked up by them too. Read How You Want is a special publishing service that provides big print, but dyslexie font, and that sells internationally. And so your book, which might have gone internationally anyway with your original publisher, goes again. It's usually the libraries that buy these copies. I think that is incredibly important. I'm not dyslexic, and I looked at the font and I couldn't tell the difference. But one of my writing mentorees, or hazelnuts as they call themselves, she wrote about her own book about the challenges of dyslexia. She said, that's fantastic, I can read that.
Yeah,
And
right.
so I think it's things like that that your podcast can share. Now, the Read How You Want is centered in Sydney, I think, at the moment. But the thing is that it goes all over the world, but she only takes the books that are already published,
Yeah.
not unpublished manuscripts, and is fairly choosy. And it's adults and children. It's usually mainstream. I don't think she does picture books. I think that's too complicated for their system. But I just thought I would mention that because I think it's a very important area.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone that I'm actually myself a little bit dyslexic, so
I know you put it on your site. That's why I read it. I do my
yeah.
research. No, I just thought you mightn't have known about it, and I didn't find out about it for a few years. And
Yeah,
it's run by a former publisher from Penguin,
yeah.
so she really knows her stuff. So it's Read How You Want.
Read how you want.
Yeah. Um, the other thing I thought, if you don't mind, I'd mention, because you were asking me about the long-term writing business, apart from the supportive family, and I really appreciate that, because writers need emotional support when people reject your stories or whatever. But I had mined my family when they were younger. My children are all redheads and all very fair. And so my daughter, when she was quite young, got sunburnt, very badly sunburnt and pinned off. So I wrote a story for round about the 10-year-olds called Skin Zip Me. And in this story, the girl's skin totally peels off. And so she's see-through. And so for the next 7 years, till her skin grows again, she's see-through. So the thing is that that story hasn't dated now, and I'm just looking at a possibility for a translation for this one because it's not stuck in any particular period. Um, and there have been so many issues about you have to be of the culture or you cannot write about a particular culture. Well, as far as I know, there's nobody in that category. So this one's universal.
Yeah,
The greatest problem is for an illustrator. The original story went really, it was very popular because it was easy to read and it's funny. But I looked at it just recently because sometimes if you've written a story quite some time ago, there are things that date. So, for example, I wrote a series of junior mysteries called The O Gang about orienteering kids who went in a gang and every weekend they went orienteering, and I used what our family did. Problem with that is technology's overcome a lot of those plots. So things where I had audio, sound, or this, that, and that. Today's kids say, why don't you use a GPS to find whatever it was?
Yeah.
So sometimes the technology will date. So there are a few stories I have from earlier times that I wouldn't bother to redo, but it's possible to replace a piece of technology like a Polaroid or a Walkman or whatever it was of that period. What I now do is when I write any technology into a current story, I don't put an iPhone or anything, no product placement at all. I invent a device so that it won't date.
Yeah.
So that's the technology. But attitudes also change too. So in some cases, because I was always interested in people coping successfully with being different, I often wrote about other cultures. So some of that has not dated, but the names have. So in a normal classroom these days, you'd have Abdul, you'd have Muhammad, you'd have Nathan, you'd have Lee, whatever.
Yeah.
I had always used a cultural. Every Greek character I had was Papa's surname. Every Chinese one was Lee for a while. Now it's much more diverse,
Yeah.
and it needs to be, and that's how it should be. But I'm just saying that sometimes a story can have enough intrinsic value, but if you've used an animal, I have one called Fay Mouse, which is about a large and clumsy cat born into a family of highly talented mice. Now, Fay Mouse is Fay Mouse, and that was a result of a piece of fan mail. A young girl said she wanted to be Fay Mouse when she grew up. But that story hasn't dated because it's an animal, it's playing with words, but it's about accepting someone who is different.
Yeah.
And that's a universal story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That never gets
Yeah.
old, is it? We still struggle with that, and we should still make more efforts to,
Yeah.
understand and
If
accept people that are different.
you ask me what I want to talk about, there's two things I'll fit in very quickly before we run out of time.
Yeah.
One is I've one area I've written in because I had a teaching background is authorpreneurship, of how authors can get and illustrators can get themselves organized. So that authorpreneurship book, you'll have my website on anyway, you can have a look at that.
Yeah.
The other one on the website, which might be useful, is on the About Hazel, and that's the doco that my daughter made for my 80th birthday. But she interviewed all these people from my past without quite a number of hazelnuts. But the thing, it's not an ego thing. That is a period of writing that has changed. For example, now most writers wouldn't keep manuscripts. They wouldn't use a typewriter. They would. So historically, things are a little bit different. And
Yeah.
now a writer needs a portfolio of skills and probably a portfolio of genres in which to work, and a 13-year-old in the extended family who's a technological whiz. Without that, you're not going to survive. The other thing I just wanted to mention very quickly, and that is related to the Go Go Gecko book. I'm the grandmother of four grandsons that range in age from 26 to 5. The 5-year-old turned 5 yesterday. The two boys in Darwin, the little ones, the 5 and the 7-year-old, I write a story for them every birthday, like yesterday. The older ones, they can write their own now. But the thing is, when I write this story, I use family photos, and it's just for them. But the issue of privacy for children online is highly, highly relevant now, and many educators are aware of this too. So we only ever take the photos from the back and so on. What happened was a producer came to me and asked me if I could allow her to use a story, one of mine, for her son, who has difficulties reading. He really likes my hippo books, but have I got anything else? The only thing I had that was uncommitted was Go Go Gecko, which was the story of the gecko in the letterbox in Darwin of my grandsons. Now, their photos were in the original copy, and the producer, Lisa Lowe, said, I want to use 2D animation and I want to use AI for the background. And I said, I have a problem with that. I support human creators, but only if we understand that this is a case study to find out how to do it. She also speaks Indonesian, Mandarin, English, and something else. Malaysian Indonesia, very close. And she wanted it to go into those languages and into 2D immediately. She wasn't going to do a formal print book initially. So Lisa and I and my daughter-in-law in Darwin, who's very good at detail, she's terrific, we were on WhatsApp for 2 months, and we were in 3 different time zones, all of us, and we fixed up the story to make sure that the details were right, because the AI stuff was just wrong for the type of trees, the type of house, all sorts of things. And this story had a 3-legged dog and a peacock in it, which was not in AI. It is now. Let me tell you, my son looks nothing like this Chesty Bond character. And but because my 2 kids are very, very blonde, they're very obvious. They know that they're these cartoon style, love it. And their school teaches Indonesian. So when I was up there, I read it to them. Now, I see this purely as a case study, but for those who are grandparents, they should be very careful not to put their family photographed stories that they've written perhaps for extended family online without realizing where they're going to.
Yeah, which is
And that's an
becoming more
aspect of
prevalent.
AI people hadn't. I'm not against AI, and AI isn't one format. It's I'm against the theft of creators' earlier work without payment to go into the
Yes.
data mine. Totally against that, because all my books have been taken, have been skimmed, and that's the equivalent of a writer's superannuation. But I am not against the use of new mediums that might streamline mundane tasks and sheets you've got to do and that's it. And I think that is a separate issue.
Yeah.
But I do want to draw attention to that, because I have a number of writing clients who call themselves hazelnuts, and quite a few of them write for their grandkids. And this is an issue that's only come up very recently.
Yeah. Well, before we just wrap up, quickly explain what a hazelnut is. You've referred to hazelnuts several times.
Oh, I didn't start that. But obviously my name's Hazel. One of the early groups that I was involved with, they put their own anthology together. That was the Homespun Professional Writing Group, and they called it A Bunch of Hazelnuts. And from then on, whenever I had writing clients, they all call themselves hazelnuts. My most recent group have been about 6 surgeons who have migrant backgrounds, who are on the cusp of retiring, who do a lot of compassionate surgery, but they wanted to write their family stories for their sons and daughters who'd had a different life from what they'd had. And so they call themselves hazelnuts too. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's where it's come from. I don't know, there's hundreds of them now.
That's a legacy of helping writers, and that's what you've done for the.
Well, I think it is important too, because I see that as part of telling the story of the modest heroes, the quiet heroes, the ordinary people that you know in your ordinary community. They may not be public figures, but you know that they've done things that are really important. And I mean, when you look at it, a writer's legacy is perhaps words and ideas and interpretation. I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget it, and stories that could be in any format. But a person's legacy is their friends, their families, what community problems they've solved. And I think that's the importance of it.
Yeah. Anyway, I'd love to keep delving and talking to you for another 5 hours, but we've coming up to time. So, if there's anything else you'd like to say before
Look,
we
I'll
finish
just
up?
show you this one very quickly. As an example of a weird cover that I'm not good at choosing cover, my daughter, who's the marketing, said, "Oh, that's fine, Mum. It's a vintage typewriter." And I said, "Well, I used to have one of those. It's not that vintage." So the covers really matter in the books. My website's hazeledwards.com, and because I get a lot of requests for things from aspiring writers, I try to put a lot of resources up there that are free to download. And most of the books and issues we've mentioned here, you'll find there are resources there. And also where the books are available if you want to buy them. The authorpreneurship one I mentioned is published by Amber Press, wherever I put that one, and it's they have other resources for writers as well.
Brilliant. And your website will all be linked. So for
Yeah,
anyone looking to check into these things, go to the comments, not the comments, to the description, and it'll be all linked in there.
yeah, yes, that's right.
Hazel Edwards, thank you
Thank you,
very
Aaron.
much for agreeing to do my channel. This has been such an honor to chat to you and delve into a bit of your writing.
Well, we did meet at a book launch some time ago of one of my hazelnuts, didn't
One of
we?
your
That
hazelnuts,
was a
yes.
couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, at
in
least 2 years
Shepparton.
ago. Who Tracy Spivey, who was
Mm,
one of my earlier author talks,
yep.
and incredible,
She's done
talented.
a wonderful job on her book
Yeah,
because she really went back and reworked it, and it's a very good combination of the young man's view in a historical perspective. It's a really good book. I've got a
yeah,
copy of it here somewhere. I've got a shelf of hazelnuts.
abs-
Here we are. Product
yeah.
placement.
One hell at a time. Yeah, brilliant book,
Good
and
title. That
championed.
wasn't her first title, by the way. Yeah, no.
I do know that one. We just got to
Thank you very much.
get her writing
Pleasure.
again.
I'll put that up
Thank
on
you.
my my socials for you too.
But yeah,
When that will go up fairly.
so thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you Hazel again for joining me. Happy reading. Subscribe and follow for more.